Good evening, everybody. On March 29th, the Sacramento Kings officially ended the longest drought in NBA history, 16 years since 2006. And today, we have a special guest, Son Cunningham, to talk about the Sacramento Kings. Welcome, Son.
Hey, Fernando, how are you doing?
Good. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you here today. A sports reporter and producer at Fox and Sacramento Kings radio reporter. So I cannot think anyone better than you to tell us a little bit more about the atmosphere right now at Sacramento. So my first question will be how the city is feeling about it. I mean, it's huge.
Oh, I mean, it is. I mean, you're talking about a 17-year playoff drought that just came to an end. And, you could see just moments throughout the season where this team had not only captivated, the minds and attentions of people locally in this town, but nationally as well and internationally. And it all starts with, maybe a Band-Aid with Malik Monk and then the beam that gets kind of invented on the top of Golden One Center that they light up after every single win here in the city. And it just kind of took on a whole life from its own. It seemed like a very gimmicky team in the beginning, a really high, fast-paced offense, an efficient offense, and a really talented group under Mike Brown and Domantas Sabonis for getting a bigger sample size than what Kings fans were used to seeing even last year. But all of a sudden, it just turns into this really fun team to watch. It was kind of that we always talk about league pass alert, and this was a team that you probably had circled on your league pass scheduling because of just how entertaining of a product it was. And yeah, they don't play a lot of defense, but they've got an offensive juggernaut that people just haven't seen before in the NBA. I mean, you're talking about a better offense statistically than what you would see from the Golden State Warriors. So yeah, this town absolutely is behind their Kings. They're locked into the upper echelon here of the playoffs and having home court in the first round, and it probably just exceeded everyone's expectations.
No, definitely. It reminds me, so I'm from Spain. I used to play NBA Live back in the early 2000s. So I remember my cousin and we sometimes selected that Sacramento Kings with Peja Stojakovic, Chris Webber, Mike Bibby. So it was fantastic, and the Hall of Fame coach Rick Adelman. But now it's a completely different vibe. I feel it's a more young team that time. So the second thing that I would like to talk about you is Mike Brown. I don't know if you were expecting such a career in Sacramento Kings. So it looks like it's going to be the second NBA Coach of the Year for him. So what do you think about him? So what's the key of this head coach to make as far as he's doing?
Yeah, I mean, if I understood it right, I mean, the one thing is with Mike Brown is when he came into Sacramento, of the candidates they had interviewed, I felt and I said as much on the air at Fox 40 as well as our Kings Beat podcast that that he was the right coach for the moment. And what I mean by that was he wasn't a first timer, but he wasn't necessarily. I mean, I think a lot of people would have considered him a retread. I didn't. I think he's a guy who hadn't done it in a long time, had some success under Steve Kerr with the Warriors and played a very crucial, important role for the Warriors. He first came in and really helped design an offense, one that most people wouldn't give him much credit for just because of the offensive talent that they have on that team. And then he had to segue over to being a defensive type of coordinator, which is more in line with what he is as a head coach. But the one thing I've known about Mike Brown is he's such an OCD, attention to detail type of coach. And really, a lot of really successful coaches are, but he comes from a Greg Popovich line of thinking, that kind of mentorship, if you will, and really has his own personality that he puts all over his team. And it hadn't, he won a championship in Cleveland. It's famously, we know what he did with LeBron James, but he also worked his way out of Cleveland when it didn't go so well. And then he had to go coach Kobe Bryant and the Lakers. And I always say coaching two generational talents, that's a really tough job for a lot of NBA coaches. Not everyone can take that type of setup. And it sounds weird because you've got a guy in Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, two generational talents, top 5, maybe top 10 all time in the NBA. but that can be difficult for some coaches, especially coaches that want a lot of control. Him coming to Sacramento, especially with what he learned, I think, at Golden State and each stop along the way, he has a lot of great players that want to share the ball. He doesn't have these egomaniacs or these guys who think that the ball, has to come to them so often. It's a very unselfish team. They play a certain style through Domantas Sabonis, who really touches everyone and makes everyone better on the offensive end. So with having Domas and having that Ferrari in De'Aaron Fox and trying to teach him to keep the foot on the pedal, he's had great success here, and they surrounded those guys with shooters. So it shouldn't really surprise anybody, but it did, just because we haven't seen it, like I said, for 16 straight seasons of playoff basketball.
Oh, definitely. So you mentioned at the beginning, so the Sacramento Kings, they are going to have most likely the best offensive rating of the NBA history. De'Aaron Fox, I believe, is Mr. Clutch. So they have also Mr. Triple Double, Domantas Sabonis, as you were saying. I had the opportunity to watch Sacramento at United Center a couple of weeks ago, and what a game, and what a final 3-point from De'Aaron Fox. You also have an interesting couple that I would like to talk a little bit more, Keegan Murray and Kevin Huerter. So on top of mine, I can think about Klay Thompson and Stephen Curry, like more than 200 3-point within the same team. So that's definitely something special. So can you tell me like 2 or 3, the most important keys about this team, other than what I've been mentioning? I mean, you can also highlight more about what I discussed, but I want to understand your perspective, why this team is working so well.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned 2 guys right there, right off the bat, with Keegan Murray, who comes in as a little bit more of a seasoned rookie as opposed to like a Jaden Ivey or Paolo Banchero, who come in so young. Keegan Murray had the opportunity to grow a little bit and kind of become the player that he is in college. He had a couple years there, and he comes in a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and a little bit more mature. That being said, he's no different than any other rookie. He's going to hit some pitfalls along the way. So there's certainly plenty of things he can continue to grow in, but the one thing you knew he could do is score the basketball. And that corner 3, anything from the 3-point line, he's just really been impressive. Obviously, you mentioned the 200 threes that he's had. That sets a rookie record, and I think that record will be probably broken in a couple of years, just because of the way the NBA is, and you see all these guys shooting the basketball. But nice for Keegan Murray to have that. It's a big stepping stone for him to have as he goes into a sophomore season. He plays such a different role on this Kings team than he would than what Paolo Banchero, someone like Jaden Ivey, who's going to a team that doesn't have playoff expectations. They just have a wide range for them to grow and get better and have the ball thrown to them and be a number 1 scoring option, if not at least a top 3 scoring option. That's not the case for Keegan Murray. He has to kind of earn it, and he has to go out there and be and not really make the mistakes a rookie is usually afforded in the NBA. So I'm glad you mentioned Keegan Murray. Kevin Huerter has been fantastic. He has playoff experience coming from Atlanta. They've made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. He played with a superstar in Trae Young. Yeah. He knows what it's like to play with a guy who's fast, who likes to share the ball. But having this type of offense where he's getting a lot more looks than what he got in Atlanta, especially as a starting 2 guard, has really flourished for him. And I think the guy, look, you mentioned Huerter and Keegan. I think the guy to me who's like the X factor, because if he doesn't have a good game, this team has a hard time winning. They've still won without him having good games, but it just looks a little different and a little bit wonkier. But when he's on, they look like world beaters. And I'm talking about Malik Monk, and it comes after a career year he had with the Lakers. He and Huerter have played really well alongside each other, and they provide a lot of spacing for people like Domas and Fox to work. So, I mean, to me, he could be in the running for 6th man of the year. I don't think he'll get it. I think he's had 2 inconsistent of a year, but that's been fine. He's been fantastic for what the Kings need him to be on both ends of the floor, especially as a playmaker, which this team can outside of Sabonis can sometimes hurt and really have a need for as the season goes on. So I think he's been that X factor. But you mentioned Malik Monk. I mean, you mentioned Kevin Huerter and Keegan Murray. Those 3 guys have certainly all played crucial roles with the Sacramento Kings team.
No, that definitely, I agree with you. So the rookie record at some point, I don't know, I imagine you are familiar with Juan Carlos Navarro. So he's one of the best talented Spanish player back at the time. So I believe he was very close to broke that record when he played the only season. So it will be interesting in the future, as you're saying, like now 3-point is like 2 points back at the time. But I was listening about some rumors that maybe they are going to introduce the 4-point line. So maybe that record will remain forever, because I don't know, that will be kind of interesting, the 4-point line, but we'll see what happens.
Do you want to see it?
I don't know. I mean, I think it makes sense, and it can enhance the competitiveness at the end of the game. But on the other hand, I think it has the possibility that maybe players abuse of the line, similar to what it's happening with the 3-point line. I think it's good because the game evolved so much during the years. But I don't know. It will be hard to adjust, but at the same time, it will be cool, especially at the end of the games. But honestly, to be honest with you, I really like centers, and I miss a little bit that like Shaquille game, or I don't know, or maybe Joel Embiid kind of moves, or Hakeem Olajuwon. I don't know. It will be something interesting to watch if it ended happening. But
Yeah, I'm of the same. I don't want to see it. I just think it's too gimmicky. Look, the 3-point line hasn't been around for the entire NBA history, so we get it. But I just don't think scoring is the problem in the NBA. I mean, scoring is up every single year. You don't need to add another 4-point shot.
Yeah,
I'm good with the way things are for sure.
Yeah. So the next topic I would like to discuss with you. So you know that the assistant head coach is from Spain, Jordi Fernández. I don't know if you have the opportunity to interview him, I imagine. So can you tell us a little bit more about him, personality, like his character, what he's like with the team? So yeah, if you can tell us a little bit more about him.
No, Jordi is really the defensive coordinator of this team. We got a chance to really get to know him in summer league. He was the head coach for the summer league team. And Mike, when that was the first move he made, is when he came to Mike Brown. When he came to Sacramento, Jordi Fernández was the associate head coach, and they had experience with one another under at the Nigerian national team. Jordi Fernández served a really big role in Denver under Michael Malone. Been able to speak to Michael Malone about him at length. And Jordi, when you get to know him, I mean, he's a great guy. He's very intense. I think he's got a great competitive spirit about him, and he's really he really takes the time to get to know each and every one of his players from an individual standpoint. But he is a direct extension of Mike Brown. They pair each other really, really well. But I do feel, look, there's a lot of buzz going on with the way Jordi Fernández has had impact on every place he's gone. The way people talk about him from throughout the league, it would not shock me to see him one day be a head coach, and it could be in the next few years.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. If you see him as the first head coach ever for Spain, but according to what you have mentioned, it looks like that's the case. That you'll see him hopefully one day as a head coach of. We don't know where, but I think he will make it. So definitely good to know that. I mean, it will be huge for my country. So it will be. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and I think he should be. I mean, he represents the country well. He's proud of his roots. But he's kind of a coaching lifer. Like, he's gone through various different stages of coaching and picked up on a lot of different things. He's had the opportunity to be with both FIBA and NBA, and he obviously sees what the college game is, and he's been surrounded by a lot of coaches during his time. So you never hear a bad word about him, and I think he's going to be a big part of the fabric of the success with the Kings. And then who knows what the future holds. I know he's got interviews, and they've already kind of been reported as well. But even if it doesn't happen next year, it certainly is likely to happen down the road. And he's got a very much a coach's mindset, and I think a lot of players respect him as well. Certainly here in Sacramento, getting from what I've heard in Denver, there's no bigger champion of him than Nikola Jokic. So when you got someone like that who's been able to thrive under a system like Michael Malone runs, and then kind of have Jordi Fernández attached to that, and he credits a lot of his development with Jordi, I think it will go a long way.
Yeah, that's great. So we'll continue monitoring his career. So what's next for the Kings? So which are your feelings about the NBA playoffs? So do you have, like, first of all, I mean, I will ask you about your prediction, but first of all, which team do you prefer during the first round? Golden State, the Clippers, or the Lakers? So what do you think?
Yeah, if I'm a Kings fan, I'd probably not want to see any part of the Lakers or the Warriors. Lakers obviously have some length and they're kind of rolling of late. The Warriors certainly have the experience. Either way, you're going up against some players that have NBA postseason legacies and have climbed the highest mountains that there are to climb in the NBA postseason. So that would be difficult. But I will say there won't be a lot of pressure on the Kings, even though they would go in as a higher seed and have home court advantage. The pressure is really going to be on someone like LeBron James when it comes to his own legacy in this league. But take that a step further, and you see the Warriors, they still have all their pieces as a dynasty in this league. And even though they're coming in as a lesser opponent in the standings, nobody wants to see them. They haven't shown that they can be a team that would play well on the road. Obviously, they've been a terrible road team this year, but Sacramento's not that far from San Francisco, and their crowd will travel very well in games against the Kings up in Sacramento. So if you're the Kings, you don't really want to see either one, the Warriors or the Lakers. That would basically leave the Clippers, in my opinion. And if you're able to get the Clippers, I think you'd be fortunate, especially with a big question mark as to whether or not Paul George can come back with his injury. And plus, much like the Warriors, the Clippers just haven't really shown the ability to be consistent all year long. It does frighten me a little bit if I'm a Kings fan to see Kawhi Leonard now playing in back-to-backs. Clearly, he won't have to play in back-to-backs during the NBA playoffs, but certainly it shows that he's taking another step in his rehabilitation back into becoming a regular NBA player again, because for the majority of the season, he was not playing in back-to-back. So they have a lot of confidence that he'll be healthy and be able to go through this postseason. So, and the Kings, let's face it, of all those teams, they played the Clippers probably the most, had the most dominance. I mean, it's been close games. They've been very, very entertaining, and certainly everyone remembers that double overtime game down in LA not long ago where they set the record. So just an incredible game that was. And if they have more of that in store for a 7-game playoff series, sign me up. I'd be all for it.
Yeah, I believe the sky is the limit for the Kings during these playoffs. As you said, the pressure, I think, is going to be during the first. I mean, except if it's the Clipper, maybe the pressure is. I mean, you have Kawhi Leonard, and most likely you won't have Paul George, but the Clippers don't have that pressure that the Warriors or the Lakers will have. But I feel that if they will face the Warriors or the Lakers, it could be a potential scenario that the first round will be tougher than the second round, because I have the feeling, based on my perspective, that Memphis Grizzlies, if they qualify to the second round, it might be I don't want to call easier team, but I have the feeling that if Sacramento Kings beat Lakers or Warriors during the first round, they have a really good chance to make the West Conference final. So I don't know. The sky's the limit. I will be so happy to see the Kings making the West Conference finals. I don't know. I really like this kind of stories, especially with such a good franchise like Sacramento, historically speaking. So I think it will be great for the NBA for the future. So definitely.
Yeah, and having that fresh blood in there, you don't have a lot of guys with playoff experience. Clearly, Mike Brown does, and even when Domantas Sabonis was in the playoffs, he didn't play nearly the role he plays now for this Kings team. We mentioned Herter in that Atlanta Hawks team that made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. There wasn't really much expectations over on them, and they were able to get into the Eastern Finals, and then of course last year with the Mavericks, a team that was able to go in the Western Conference Finals and really kind of give the Warriors, a healthy dosage of Luka Doncic and Jalen Brunson in that series. I think that's what really, that postseason run is really what solidified a Brunson contract in New York. So some of those teams of late, it just shows you that there hasn't been a lot of hype around those teams, not a lot of experience, and they kind of have the ability to play a little bit more free, I feel, and they were able to take advantage of it. Maybe the Kings can do likewise.
Yeah. Couple more questions to wrap up the interview today. So the first one is about Domantas Sabonis. So did you notice, like, more international interest since Domantas Sabonis is in town. So uh, as an anecdote that I have in Chicago, so I didn't know about the Lithuania community in Chicago. So when I went to the stadium last 2 weeks ago, so I was very surprised. So I I'm not exaggerating if I saw like more than 100 people from Lithuania. So I wonder, not from Lithuania only, but I wonder if you have noticed like the international level awareness about Sacramento have increased.
Yeah, I'd say when he got here, I think I noticed some social media traffic early on, coming from Europe, just with the interest in Sabonis. But I don't think it wasn't really as big as we've had some. We had Peja Stojakovic, we had a lot of these Divots for a lot of
Yeah,
international ties from Sacramento. But the
Peja
most recent,
Stojakovic. Yeah.
100%, yeah, the most recent for me to see a big jump in international interest, to believe it or not, is the Kings two-way player who spends most of his time in the G League in Stockton, which was Cada. He comes from Portugal. They have a huge following, but I think where it really dawned on me was when we were in Salt Lake City for the All-Star game, and we're watching Domantas Sabonis go through three different languages, both Spanish,
Wow.
Lithuanian, and English, and in a single press conference, and he's just having to pivot to all these different languages, and it was really impressive to see. You could clearly see it during one of a big event like the All-Star game where you are on that big stage, but it didn't really, like I said, we didn't really get a huge. We got a little bit when he first, even my own Twitter account, you get some different followers from overseas to follow Sabonis.
Okay.
But majority of them came from Spain because of his ties to
Yeah,
to Spain, the
his
region.
father. Yeah, his father as well. He used to play in the city where I was born, Madrid.
Madrid,
So
yeah.
yeah, Arvidas Saboni was a legend over there. So maybe that's why. He also speaks very fluent Spanish, Domantas Sabonis, with a southern accent. So it's quite funny because he
Wow.
used to play over there as well. And maybe also he used to play in Gonzaga. So maybe it's not like the international example, it's all, he also has a lot of US exposure during college, so that's
Yeah, and I'm curious to see what it looks like. Look, the Kings are kind of putting all their eggs in one basket that Sasha Vezenkov comes over to Sacramento next year, and that'll be a little bit more of an experience to see if his following if we'll get a bigger following for him as a player who didn't play collegiately like Sabonis and Neemias Queta did in the States. He'd be a guy who is literally just an import into the States and right into Sacramento, and they're banking on it for sure. So it'll be fun to see if the Kings become this international team again like they were in the early 2000s.
yeah. And I think it's a good opportunity for them because I feel it's a reality. So more and more the NBA, of course, it's an American league, but international players have been increasing in the latest years, and you really need that because nowadays, as we have been facing during the Olympics, the distance between the US and the European basketball, especially, it's been shortening out. So you have to face the reality, and you have to incorporate international players within your team, and that's the way to evolve. But definitely, I think it was a good move, and Sacramento historically have been a franchise like that, as you were mentioning. So yeah, hopefully it will be like that. It will be, I think, more interesting, not only for the European people. I think it will be also beneficial for Sacramento, since the exposure on an international level, it will be higher. So the engagement with the fans. So definitely it will be worthy, that move. So last question that I have, and I'm curious since I'm not familiar with the story. So where the light the beam, where is that coming from? So I've been hearing about it a lot lately because of what is happening, but I'm curious if you can tell us like the story behind the scenes of that.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it definitely comes up organically. They wanted something that, look, when Vivek Ranadive built Golden One Center, the owner of the Kings, he called Golden One Center that type of arena as a modern day cathedral. It's a meeting place to bring everyone for arts, culture, sporting events, all these different things. And it he always referred to it as being something that would be iconic, especially for a little city like Sacramento. and that if you were to look down from an airplane flying into Sacramento, you'd be able to see it and go, "Wow, that's Golden One Center." That was the idea. He called it a beacon of light. Now he's turned it into a light literally when they win. It was Vivek Ranadive with some people behind the scenes like Mo Brazelton, who is a guy who has been with the organization for so long. I'm going to get his title wrong, but I know he's the manager of the game day operations and what you would see from an entertainment standpoint if you ever go to a game. He's so great at his job that when the NBA has the NBA Finals, when they have the All-Star game, these big events like that, they bring in Mo Brazelton and a lot of his crew from Sacramento to oversee and run the entertainment for these venues. And he's someone I know that had come up with the idea. They were coming up with different ideas for it, and that's kind of where it spawned. And fortunately, it was very organic. And Fernando, I mean, in sports, it's hard to find things that are unique to anybody anymore. Like it's hard to find originality. These teams kind of copy each other a lot, and especially with what works. And to have something like this that they can, flip a switch and have this gigantic purple lightsaber up in the air and after games is pretty amazing. You can see it from miles around, and the community's really gotten behind it. You see people who are wearing clothing that say "Light the Beam," hats that say "Light the Beam." You hear the chants within not only Golden One Center when the Kings are about to close out an opponent, you're starting to hear it on the road as well. It's been really exciting for this organization and this fan base to really get behind and have this kind of rallying cry, if you will. It's a total sense of civic pride, and it's been great. And it'll be interesting to see what other NBA teams or professional sports franchises come up with their own versions of what the beam looks like.
Yeah, no, definitely. So a bonus question. So if someone doesn't know Sacramento Kings, so what will be your recommendation? Like any documentary, film, or I don't know, something that you can recommend to the people to understand more about the Sacramento Kings history or current situation? So do you have some recommendation about it?
Yeah, I wish I could say I did, because they had a great documentary that was filmed by ESPN and was shut down. It was a 30 for 30. It was called Down in the Valley, and it really documented how the Kings got to Sacramento, and then how Sacramento twice almost lost their team to a team like Seattle or even Anaheim, and how Sacramento Mayor Kevin Johnson, coupled with David Stern, and then finding, of course, Vivek Ranadive, were able to keep the Kings here in Sacramento. It's a brilliant story. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of things that have come to light with Mayor Johnson over the past few years, a lot of stuff that dates back to when he was a player. And in the age of kind of this cancel culture, it's hard to tell that story without referencing some of those things. So that would have been probably the one I would sign up for the most. You can kind of get a sense of what that feeling is. There's a documentary that a buddy of mine, Carmichael Dave, who I used to work in radio with, he has a documentary called Playing to Win, where he took an RV around the U.S. And tried to spread the word of the small market in Sacramento. And that was kind of a Keeping the Kings documentary. There's also another one that I do a podcast called The Kings Beat with James Ham, who's covered the team for quite some time. I'm actually so excited for James, because James will get to cover his first playoff series with the Kings this year. After all these years of covering the team, I fortunately was able to have my own taste of Kings success, if you will, during the early 2000s. My first full year, they went to the Western Conference Finals. So I was very, I'm not only old, but I was very blessed to be able to do that in my own hometown, because I grew up here in Sacramento. But his documentary is called Small Market, Big Heart. And that's one you could probably check out as well, I believe, on YouTube. And you can kind of see Sacramento's fight and how much they mean to this city, how much that team means to the city, and how they kept the Kings. I would say the ESPN one was so much better, but that one has unfortunately been shelved and may never see the light of day.
It is what it is. Yeah. Thank you for the recommendations.
Got it.
So yeah, thank you so much for your time, Son. So I recommend everyone to follow Son on social media. He will be covering the Sacramento Kings during the playoffs run. So hopefully he will have a lot of work during the next few months. That will be great news for the city of Sacramento. And as I said at the beginning, it's been a pleasure, Son. As a huge fan of NBA, this has been a great interview and opportunity for me to understand more about Sacramento, the Sacramento organization, and we'll continue following you and understanding how Sacramento evolves during this season.
Yeah, no, Fernando, appreciate it. Sorry, it took a little hard time to kind of schedule the busy
Don't
schedule.
worry at all.
But hopefully looking forward to seeing you down the road in person one day.
Yeah, hopefully. So yeah, thank you so much. So hi to everyone that he's been listening this interview, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks, man.
Thank you.